Hey everybody, welcome to the MyPilgrimage podcast. This is week 7. We're talking this week about consciousness. Another tricky word. A lot of New Agers like to use the word consciousness, and it sounds a little foo-foo, but it's actually not. Consciousness is something that's being studied by scientists, theologians, and yes, New Agers, and pretty much everybody across the spectrum wondering about it because consciousness is a thing. We're going to talk about that this week. We're going to talk about what it is, what it isn't, and why it's, again, not a scary thing, but something we need to know about, understand, because it has everything to do with our ability to heal ourselves and to follow that path out of addiction and into something healthy and whole and wonderful. Consciousness is something that elevates, it expands. This week's discussion in the videos from the original series that we shot in Arizona is between Ryan and myself, and it's really just trying to fully kind of get into an introduction of what consciousness is, what the thought is, because we talk about, you hear the term subconscious a lot. We're talking about consciousness, subconscious is kind of grouped in with that. So in that discussion, you'll see us kind of trying to parse out the meanings there. The discussion that Seth and I have, as usual, gets a little mystic, gets a little crazy. Watch the whole thing. I'll come back at the end and say goodbye. And thanks for joining us. For those of you guys who've been on this for a couple weeks, we're really happy to have you here. Thank you for listening. Thanks for sharing this with other people and telling people about it. And we really, really appreciate it. Okay, without further ado, here's Ryan and myself talking about consciousness.
I think some people really struggle with this idea of this being an overly spiritual or word, or maybe a difficult word to talk about, or concept. Sometimes people really get hung up on the subconscious, like things that influence you outside of your awareness. And so we're just, it's interesting to explore that idea. And I guess what I'm understanding is you've run into a lot of people that you feel like that's taboo topic for, is to explore this idea of consciousness or awareness, or there's these things influencing us that are happening, but we're not conscious or aware of what's, shaping our life and our direction.
We talked about in the chapter about triggers that it's no longer the thing that's making me lust, it's making me sin, but it's the thing that's making me feel inside. It's the thing that's triggering the anxiety or the pain and that underneath thing. And we can trace that all the way back to how aware are we of what's going on inside of us. So if I have a lot of suppressed pain or suffering or trauma, am I aware of that this thing is triggering that thing? So is my consciousness aware of that, right? You'll hear people talk about different levels of consciousness, different levels of awareness, and the idea, I guess, would be that we want people to rise to a level of awareness about themselves internally.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Right? It's like we were hanging out this fall in Alaska, and we went for a hike. You remember that day?
I do. That was a great day.
I know, it was a great day. But
it was a great day.
I totally get this idea, maybe even more so now, because I just come from an experience that week where came to an awareness, or it was brought to my consciousness, if you want to say it that way, that like I was really angry, and I was so angry about some stuff that had happened in the past in a relationship, right. And it had been sitting there, but it obviously had been impacting me or affecting me, right. And I found it like remarkable and freeing to recognize it and get that out. Mm-hmm. But I also found it really interesting at the time, too, to go, man, I didn't think I was angry. Yeah. I didn't think I was angry, but then when I went through some processing or went through some conversations, discovering that I was angry and how much of that anger I had held on to. And then I started trying to unpack, how had this shaped my life over the last few years when I had been angry. Right. But not expressing it, or not recognizing that I was angry.
Exactly. Once you've had that level of awareness, that's now part of that consciousness, and you can no longer go, I'm cool with the anger. Once you realize it, you go, oh, this thing has been dictating some of my behaviors, and I don't like that. You realize, now you're aware of it, you go, I don't want that anymore. I don't want that in me. And I guess you could say that's a kind of a deeper place, a deeper level of consciousness, a deeper level of awareness about what goes on inside you. The theory is that you could just keep going. You can go to deeper and deeper places where you start to understand everything that kind of goes on in your life. And, we don't talk about saying, we want to have all control, but self-control being one of these things is the fruits of the Spirit, this idea that the Holy Spirit helps us become more and more and more aware, so we have more and more self-control. Because if the anger that you had was causing behaviors that you didn't want to have, then you really didn't have control. And it wasn't because you didn't want to, it's because you weren't even aware of it. When you became aware, all of a sudden you gained a certain level of self-control. And the Holy Spirit has everything to do with that, helping to reveal those things and pull those out. And in your mind, you start to kind of open up and go, oh, I see it. There's deeper places to go. What does that make you think and feel?
Oh, it doesn't make me uncomfortable at all. It actually makes me really curious, especially after some recent experiences of, I don't think I'm unwilling to recognize feelings, but sometimes just unaware, just unable, until, over the last few years, I had this desire to go to counseling because I knew there were some things I needed to work on. I just couldn't figure out exactly what they were, and so it was like, I knew I wasn't aware of something and I was searching for somebody to help me figure those things out. Like I knew I needed to process through, think through, and then I learned how to feel through. We talked about that, just some stuff that was there. So it doesn't bother me at all. I'm not as connected to the New Age movement, so this idea of conscious, what you're aware of, your consciousness or deeper levels of consciousness, that doesn't weird me out at all.
For some people, probably even watching this video, some people that are reading these books, it'll be a trigger. That word itself will kind of be a thing that kind of sticks in you. Go, I don't like that. I don't want to talk about that word. It's important for people to understand. Words you can use whatever word you want to use, but consciousness in terms of our understanding of that is awareness, and awareness of it's an internal process. Yeah. It's important.
That's really funny how people get locked up on words, because I like that idea. It's awareness. I was talking to my son. We were on vacation, and I was asking him if he brought a charger for his cell phone. He's like, no, we didn't get a charge. I didn't bring a charger for my cell phone. He's bummed, it's gonna die. And I don't even know how we got it there exactly, but I discovered that my son didn't understand that phones had batteries. I'm like, son, where do you think the electricity goes? What do you think happens with the cord? Why are you plugging the cord into the phone? Because you got to put electricity in there. And I'm like, in there where? He's like, just in there. And I'm like, son, and then you just think it's what? Just in there, running around, and I don't know. I had never thought about it, Dad. And I'm like, when you're putting it in, you're plugging it up, and then it's charging, and it's charging a battery, and the battery is the container for the electricity. And I explained it to him, and then it's he became aware or conscious of the fact that everything that stores electricity is called a battery. Sure.
And because of that, it actually unpacks and unfolds a whole new awareness of the mechanism.
Right.
Curiosity too.
Yeah. And so when you say people get bothered by this idea of a new level of awareness or consciousness, that's just education. And we're it's and because it's about ourselves, it doesn't need to be a scary deal. Right. It's just
the exception to that, though. You see, the exception to that is if it's about ourselves, and we do have a lot of things that we don't want to uncover, then we have a lot of unconsciousness invested in not feeling those things. That's what keeps us from going there. That you said curiosity at the beginning. You said, I have curiosity. That's what's necessary. Curiosity and this little good dose of courage, because to unpack that stuff and say, God is with me, I'm going to be okay, I'm going to dig in and see what's in there, that takes courage.
Yeah, but the goal is health.
Absolutely. That is the goal.
The goal is health.
That is the goal of health, but I think for a lot of people, the goal is, and they're not even fully aware of it, the goal is to look healthy.
Or survive.
Yeah, survive.
I don't know.
Survival's a big one.
Daily survival.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I want to be healthy. Like, so I'm curious. Like, oh wow, what else is in there?
I always said when I started this process, going down this road, I said, I want to be, walk past the Victoria's Secret and it doesn't bother me at all, healthy. I want to be able to walk past the billboard, pop-up ad pops up, easily just go close it, healthy. To the point where it didn't trigger me. That was the kind of freedom I was looking for. And I was like, and that curiosity, when I started to learn about this internal stuff and everything I was kind of holding in and going, I'm going to go after that, because that started to lead down that road of actually like, oh, I can find real freedom there, And I think that now, like, my level of awareness of what goes on internally has gotten me to a point where I see everything as an internal thing. I'm in everything, like anybody I interact with, any person I'm having interactions with, what they're doing is not a real big concern. It's more about what's going on inside me, because if I can't be with people and be perfect centered and present with them and really listen, that's an internal problem. It's not what they're saying or what they're doing or how they're bothered. It's what's going on inside of me,
I understand that it might be tough for some to think in terms of this word of consciousness, or as you've reframed it, like awareness, self-awareness, exploring deeper within inside ourselves. But I'm excited about it, and, really think that this guidebook and book can help others see new things in themselves to not only work on, but work towards health with. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
I think so.
Absolutely. Okay. Oh, dude. Yeah, I think they're gonna absolutely love it.
We are recording. Okay, where are you? Okay, hey man, where are you now? Where are you?
Island. I'm back on the island base.
We're island people.
For our YouTube fans,
yeah, man, on the Whidbey Island, man.
everything is Irie.
Yeah, Irie. Everything Irie on the Whidbey Island. And you're out there and you're having I know you guys are all just smoking weed and drinking, large fruity drinks with giant wheels.
Studies have shown that's what my pilgrimage leads to. So, studies have shown.
There are a few drinking spots along the path on the pilgrimage. I think places
to
stop.
If anybody's walked the Camino, they know this.
Raise a glass, yeah.
We do a lot of drinking over. It's weird, man. When you're staying in Abbey, because some of the abbeys in Ireland, the old ones, like Iona, they still hold up the tradition, the ancient monk tradition of brewing.
Yes.
So they brew beer and they make mead. Like we can get mead from Iona. It's just so we were there, and we would, when you go to communion over there, it's not. You ain't drinking grape juice, baby.
Right.
So, yeah. But it's a tradition, man. It's a monk tradition. So gotta do it.
That's fantastic. We're talking about consciousness. The video was between Ryan and myself. The conversation was about us, and we were really just doing introduction to this concept of consciousness. I think the biggest thing that happens here, and I know that there's, after last week's conversation about demons and stuff like that, I know there was a lot of pretty intense conversation on the Facebook page, and I was getting lots of messages from people asking.
Really good conversation.
Really good. I think that at this point it's good to address, because we're bringing up a word. Consciousness is a word that tends to trigger a lot of people. Because it sounds very New Agey, and I know that there are a lot of people kind of go, "This is a New Age thing." It's really not. It's not our intention for that conscious. So, from the define in the video, we're talking about. I think I did a pretty good job of kind of talking about consciousness as awareness about things that go deeper, right? And we've talked a lot in some of the episodes. We've talked about expanded consciousness and what that means to expand one's consciousness, one's awareness. And you've been talking about this sixth sense that we have, this sense that goes inward. That you could say for the newly initiated, the very first kind of step into a larger kind of an expanded consciousness is just, I have a sixth sense. I have this other thing. I can use that sense to feel internally. And that's the first kind of thing. And I think for me, it was definitely the first kind of step when Floyd kind of took me from this outward to inward. I mean, he blindfolded me. So it literally just shut off he was shutting off the senses, the external senses, and we were taking me inward, and it was not a painless ride, but it was definitely that first kind of expanded consciousness. I was having a conversation with a friend of ours in Portugal this morning, and we were talking about this idea of expansion. And I said, look, it happened quite fast for me. And we were kind of analyzing that, because he's saying, you know, for some people it goes slower or whatever. And everybody kind of thinks that fast equals good and slow equals bad or whatever, but that's not a helpful kind of paradigm. I know that for me, there was a certain level when I first opened up. And I first opened up to this deeper experience. My awareness first kind of went from this external, you know, all these enemies, you know, pornography and alcohol and the porn industry and you know, jogging women. You know, these are no longer they were no longer enemies. They were just the part of this external experience. And all of a sudden, I went inward. I don't know, something about my experience. I got it very quickly. I was very much like, oh, like, yeah. There's this thing, and okay, I'm gonna do that now. Yeah. And so it moved kind of quick. I've seen a lot of guys, and I wanted to get your take on this. I've seen a lot of guys that that experience is just slow. It's like almost like they need to, their brain kind of hijacks the experience, and they have to think about it. And so they kind of move really kind of slow down the path. It's not just I've discovered this thing, and I'm just going to jump off the cliff, man. I'm going for it, you know. Sure. What's your take on that?
Man, that is the question. Why do some people have to suffer more than others?
That's an interesting way to frame that.
Yeah. Why do some people have to suffer more than others? I talk about, you know, I deal often with the complexity of an ego, the way egos function. It would literally take me hours to talk about actually really try to unpack my thoughts on this. And so I'm going to try to kind of keep it close, because the complexity when you do this work as closely as I do, so you're working with 10 to 20 clients a week, one-on-one, and everybody's so different, and you're working, there's a basic formula. There's energy work and there's ego work, and it's like that for everyone. But the complexity as to how their relationship with their ego and their relationship with their trauma works inside of every person is so complex and so nuanced. Right. It's just radically different. This is why I think Jesus taught a lot about just, you know, like the whole sower and the seed parable was like,
what?
They're all out there.
Go over it for those that don't know. What are we talking about?
Well, for those of you guys that don't come from the evangelical background, one of the most famous parables of Jesus, he talked about the sower and the seed, and he's basically saying when you're casting seed, you know, you cast seed, and sometimes it lands on fertile ground, and sometimes it lands on thorny ground, and sometimes it lands on rocky ground, and sometimes it lands on different ground. And sometimes it lands on, you know, shallow ground and it grows up and the weeds choke it out. And sometimes it lands on and it continues to spread. Sometimes it lands on such fertile ground that it grows well and then it spreads its seed to every other area. So, and what he's referring to is like, I'm just casting seed, and I cannot be responsible for the complexity of how people receive truth. My job is to speak the truth. And that's the weirdest thing, is that I can speak the same truth to this guy, this girl, and they all take it differently. And some of them, you know, it's like I've had people come to me after, you know, I talked to them 5 years ago, and all of a sudden they're going, now I really need this. I've suffered 5 more years, and now it's time. And and we go, why wasn't it time back then? Right. Why will some people taste it a little bit and then like run as fast as they can away from it? And then why do some people just the second they see it, they go, why is it for you and me? It took me a good 9-10 years of pretty intense suffering before I was like,
yeah, okay. Actually, I want to go to that, because I'd say that you know, when in my previous paradigm, when pornography was the enemy and there was my very kind of strict evangelical Christian kind of interpretation of everything.
Yeah.
I often ask the question, why didn't because for me, right, I went to White Raven Center, and there was a thing in a place with a name on it, you know,
right,
and a guy with a paperwork and a thing, and so it was easy to go. And I've seen a lot of guys do this, you know, where it's easy to go, okay, that I didn't get fixed over here. This thing fixed me. You know, I went White Raven Center, fixed me, or Floyd, you know, as a therapist, he fixed me. Right. So, because I look back on it and I go, it wasn't even an option for me. I suffered for I was in that pretty heavy addiction for 12 years. It didn't seem like, it's not like White Raven Center showed up when I was 21. You know what I mean?
Right.
Or the first time I got internet in the house, you know, and then it's like there was nothing but that. I had to do that. And so that's when I look at people and I go, look, each person, you have to do it this way because this is the way you're going to do it. And there is nothing, but that's where this whole kind of like every time you make a choice, you change the future. If you stop right now and you go, no, I'm going to get this. I want to understand this. That you can, but you can also go, no, I wanted to let it come to me. Okay, well, you can do that too. It's so the thing is so nebulous. It's very hard to nail down because we still do think in terms of paradigms of right and wrong, right? We go, it was wrong of me to suffer for 12 years. I should have gotten it sooner. But
we don't wrestle with that type of complexity very often. But when you do this professionally, you don't want to get lost in it. After a while, you go, oh, it seems that every soul has its time. Well, in the scripture say, there's this one scripture that says, talks about in the fullness of time, Jesus died, and it was like there was this culmination of an historical kind of evolution towards this event. And I think it's like that for every person. I think that they were referring to Jesus's life, not just all people. What I mean? And so in the fullness of time, the moment came, and you said, I cast a demon out of myself, and I was like, what? And something opened up inside me.
Right.
But this idea, Jesus is constantly pointing to this idea when he said, he who has the ears to hear and the eyes to see, let him see. If you have the ears to hear what the Spirit is saying to you, let him hear. But some people will not. And some people will, and he saw certain patterns. He's like, rich people tend to not see it. It's like, what I mean? It's easier for a camel to go eye the needle than it is for a rich man to see the kingdom of heaven. Apparently, because rich people can buy their way out of their problems as opposed to fully face them and have them trigger them like in that way. Which is remarkable. We're going to have a guest on pretty soon to our podcast, our first official interview with a guy named Steve Chandler, who's a rich guy. And he's remarkable because he's a rich guy who came to the end of his rope and just said, that's it. I'm going for the thing that matters the most. I'm buying the whole field, the pearl of great price kind of thing. Yeah. And he's remarkable because of that, because when I first met Steve, he had that I was always able to buy my way out of problems, and that is over now. And he had this determination, which was so fascinating. But I don't know, I'm fascinated, to just kind of address this word for a second. When we talk about consciousness, the way we're talking about it, because if there's any scientists listening, everybody out there saying, kind of a quasi quantum physicist, they're going to get annoyed by this, because when we're talking about consciousness, we're talking about what you see or don't see, and as opposed to what you believe or don't believe.
Sure.
So it's what is the thing you are aware of? So we can use the word awareness in place of consciousness, which is okay. I mean, that's the thing. All the work that we're doing is trying to become aware. Carl Jung says, when we do the work to make the unconscious conscious, right, then we've got a shot of freedom. And that's not an exact quote, but he was saying that, and he said, exact quote is, he said, unless we do the work of making what is unconscious conscious, it will dictate your life and you'll call it fate. Right. And so what we're trying to do is do that. Consciousness, in the terms of, if that word applied in quantum physics, is referring to the core consciousness, or what would be referred to as the soul. The idea of what is awareness, because science is one of the big problems of science. What creates consciousness? Right. Why am I aware?
But we should footnote this. We should footnote this, that if there is I know a few physicists. If there is a physicist, and especially if there's a quantum physicist that's listening, they're been annoyed for 6 weeks now, because when we bring up,
not listening anymore.
No. Yeah, because when you bring up quantum physics, there is the quantum physicist it's experiments, it's sciencey, it's doing science, and they're doing all that stuff. When we kind of, and there are quite a few spiritual teachers out there that will kind of reference quantum physics. Sure. Because if you read a book, I read this book, I think you read it too, Quantum Spirituality, the spiritual implications of the new physics. Yeah. It was and it was such a good book, because it was a guy who's studied both, but he was also a theologian, and he was trying to kind of say mysticism as a practice has these real practical applications when it comes to quantum physics. You start reading physics, and you can start kind of you start to see the overlap. The Dancing Woolly Masters, that book that I read was the best. By Gary Zukov was the best book I've read on a kind of a complete map out of what we know of quantum mechanics up to the late 70s, early 80s, and also Eastern thought and the overlap. And he really was able to kind of help, because almost like 99% of quantum mechanics and quantum physics is theory. Right. He feels like there's some kind of unwritten permission for you to go, well, if it's theory,
Yeah.
But theoretically, it also explains this thing happening over here that's been happening for 6,000 years or something like that. Then we get to play that way. And that's, I think, what you and I do a bit. If we've read so much on quantum physics and quantum mechanics, but we also read so much on spiritual thought and ideas and stuff, that you start to see those overlaps. And when you especially when you see something that's truly mystic happen with somebody, happen
Or
with
you experience it yourself. Yeah.
if you experience it yourself and you go, how did that happen? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And then you read something like that and you go, oh, it actually does kind of explain it. So you can go, I'll adopt that theory. Got help. That's the most useful thing I've found. And weirdly, quantum, like Bell's theorem and stuff, is like the most useful thing I've found to help explain my spiritual state. And it's a lot better than someone telling me from a religious standpoint that, this is what happened and this is how you do this and you make this prayer and you say these things. That makes no sense to me anymore.
Yeah.
Even Jesus's teachings, when I read them, and I'm applying what I've read, I learned about kind of the quantum realm.
Yeah,
it makes way more sense.
Universe.
Yeah, it makes more and more sense. And you just go, because like you're constantly going. Remember that when Jesus said that, like you're talking about, and I go, I remember what we were taught about that, but I also remember something very distinct. And this is great because we're having a discussion on consciousness, but there's this whole set of parables that Jesus spoke on that were the kingdom of heaven parables, right? Or these metaphors where he was constantly giving us these, the kingdom of heaven is like this, kingdom of heaven is like that. And they were confusing as hell, right? You're always trying to understand. But I remember pastors growing up, they never even went near it. Yeah. They didn't go, most of them don't go near that thing because there is no religious application for most of those things. Right. And the one about the treasure hidden in the field, I remember my pastor back in the day trying to tackle that, and it coming out. I remember him trying to tackle it, and it really came out.
Pastor Floyd?
No. This was at my church in Alaska, and
gotcha.
And Pastor Gerald was a great guy. He's a really good guy, a wonderful teacher and everything like that. But when they tried to tackle that, it just came out more confusing because he was trying to everything in when your theology is Jesus died on the cross and that's it, done. Yeah. Then it's pretty hard to make all of his teachings that before he died, make those about his death. Do you know what I'm saying? Because every single thing was about his death. But then why would he spend all this time teaching these crazy things, these amazingly deep kind of metaphors and stuff about the kingdom? Why would he do that if it was the only point was his death? And if it was not to help us become more aware of something deeper, to see the kingdom of heaven like he was doing with Nicodemus. And we actually, I was talking about John 3. We did this on the Facebook group. I made some comments about John 3 when Nicodemus comes in and he's asking those questions and Jesus is trying to raise his consciousness, like straight up.
Make him aware of what he's not aware of.
Yeah. He says to Nicodemus, the wind blows and no one knows where it came from or where it's going. They only see what it's doing, right? And he says, so is everything, like it, the spirit is that way, right? He says that he's
everyone born of the Spirit.
Born of the Spirit, right? And he's trying to raise his awareness. And Nicodemus is working at it, but he's trying to do it with his head. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you could, for sure. He's really struggling with it. I don't get it. How can I crawl in the back of my mother's womb? Surely I can't do that.
So a lot of my conversation with our friend in Portugal was the same kind of thing. You can see he's always trying to wrap his head around it, right? It's always wrapping the head. Our Mormon friend, the response that he had is kind of the same thing. It's like, I've got to wrap my head around this. So is that a bad thing? Are we telling people like, knock it off, stop using your head? You're getting it wrong.
It's not a bad thing, but it's definitely not that helpful. If one tries to go the healing route through the ego,
right?
That's a sketchy path.
And you're saying the head. You're saying the head is the ego.
Yeah. The mind, the thinking mind, is the ego. But the ego's, what happens is when people they're just stuck in. I want to understand. And I get that because I'm a teacher and I always want to grasp things. But if we lead with the thinking mind, we lead with knowledge. Okay, what happens? We lead with certainty, where it's because the ego is seeking certainty before it goes into it. Right. And of course, you can't have certainty about things like this. This is why Jesus said there's one of the real tenets of he understood about spiritual life and what he taught was that faith was required. Right. Like you had to be able to step into the unknown in order to do this, and you have to be able to lead with courage and faith as opposed to leading with knowledge. And people try to do that so often. So if you try to, but the ego will do that. The ego is it's so slippery that it'll jump right on the healing bandwagon sometimes. Like, yeah, let's heal, let's do it. The first thing I do with every single client, and the guys that are listening right now are clients of mine, will remember this. First thing I do is tell every single one of them, we're gonna spend 10 minutes a day, every day, paying attention to what you're feeling below your neck.
Right.
Paying attention to our breath, paying attention to the sensations in the body. And you're going to do it every single day. And I tell them straight up, just so you know, this is very important you understand this. If you do this, this will work. If you do not, it won't. I just tell them that right from the beginning. It won't. I said, you'll get smart. You'll get lots of knowledge. You'll become very self-aware, and you'll sound great at dinner parties. It'll be impressive to do. but you won't change.
That's the line from Avengers. Right. When Ant-Man comes out of the quantum realm and he's like, "And you guys know anything about quantum physics?" She's like, just enough to have conversations at dinner parties. And that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. The thing about it is most of them, and some of my clients have come at it with that. They're just like, wow, they can just talk about it forever. But the truth is, like, it takes faith. It's like without faith, it's impossible to please God. Pleasing God is kind of a funky term, but like without faith, it's impossible to actually achieve awakening. Mm-hmm. You have to be willing to go into the unknown. And that was what you and I had that so many people haven't. And I get it. I think I understand at some level, because I look at people and go, man, it's just, for some people, it just takes a lot more suffering than others. And the complexity of how they hold trauma and that kind of stuff matters. But ultimately, I think that when we refer to consciousness, we're referring to the soul. Like, when I look at you, right, your body, you have a body, and you have thoughts, and you have feelings, and you have emotions, and you have all these kind of things, but none of those things are you. They're yours. You have your thoughts and your feelings, your emotions, your body, your brain, but none of them are you. Right. When we're talking about consciousness, we're talking about you, your core consciousness, soul. And that's another word that was used all the time in our childhood that was never given any actual meaning.
Right.
Other than it's this thing that can kind of be bought and sold according to your belief systems, Right. But it was we talk about don't give up, what good is it to gain the whole world but lose your soul? But nobody ever told us what the soul was and how you lose it and how you gain it and all that kind of stuff. We didn't even know what it was. The soul is your core consciousness. So the point when you begin to observe your feelings, observe your thoughts, observe your emotions, you can notice them, observe your ego and its narratives. The one that is observing is soul. It is consciousness. Mm-hmm. And the biggest problem in science is that they can't explain that.
Right.
No one can explain it.
And it's funny, they're trying. There are a lot of people,
and they will continue to try until someday they do. This is why science fiction and mysticism is a precursor to actual science, because people are having experiences, like you and I are having experiences that can't be explained. This is why the huge psychedelic revolution is happening right now, why soon it's going to be legalized again. Psilocybin and ayahuasca and DMT and all these different psychedelics, even marijuana, that brings people into a higher consciousness state for a small period. Right. It's coming back because people are having experiences that are transforming their lives that they can't explain, and science can't tell them anything. And as a result, science will catch up. Give it 100 years, and they'll be able to figure that out. I guarantee. Right. Yeah. Guarantee. Which would be awesome. It's not a bad thing. I know people think that means Jesus is going to come back and God's going to blow up the world, but that's not true. It means it means the kingdom of God is going to become known and present in the here and now. This world.
Right. That seems to be what Jesus was actually talking about. That's certainly not how it's been interpreted by the Christian church ever since the Roman Catholics kind of
or the Mormons.
No, there's a definite kind of, this is how the future is going to play out. It's unfortunate because I think that it again, going back to awareness, when we are focused on that kind of when the future, you and I, it's a perfect example, growing up in a Pentecostal church, in which our mom was like, this is exactly how this is all going to go down. And so the real conversation was, pre-tribulation rapture, post-tribulation rapture, what's going to happen? I had this deathly fear that I was going to get transported out of here and naked.
That was big, man.
I was terrified of being like God, like me, because the whole thing was like, wait, I'm wearing a t-shirt and some shorts and some shoes. Those can't go to heaven. You know,
I had the same thing. So
I am going to show up
naked
in heaven naked, and then I think I remember having I probably asked Mom, but I remember the thought process was, oh, you won't be ashamed. You won't be ashamed of it.
We asked Mom, so wait a minute, and you don't touch the streets. They got that interpretation. So you're floating above the streets.
You're above the streets,
naked, and no one has a problem with that.
Yeah, and you won't care. There'll be no shame. And I go, that's great. I still don't want to do it.
I got so worried if I got a boner. If I got a boner,
you don't get erections in heaven.
That was the thing. Then it led to this, like, no, because there's no giving of marriage in heaven, remember?
Exactly.
So there's no sex in heaven. We're all just worshiping God.
Oh, we're going to do a whole podcast on that teaching, by the way. That's the future. That's season 2. We're going to get into, season 2.
What's it called? Is there sex in heaven? Is that it? What are you talking about?
Yeah, no, season 2 is going to be, we're going to start tackling some of the more tricky and complicated things around consciousness, awareness, sexuality, and that stuff. So for sure. But yeah, I did have those, I had those fears anyway, but it's funny because when you all of a sudden you let go and you go, oh, actually the future's not written. It's not written. Even scripture and Jesus said that, and we're okay. We can actually have permission to visualize what we want things to be like, and then pursue making those. And then in fact, that's more of the Hebrew Jewish kind of way of understanding the kingdom of heaven was that we are the creators of that. And that experience that
co-creators with God.
And so
that's the Celtic thread too. Celtic thing is very much we are the co-creators of God. And it's cool because this is where this is when we talk about consciousness. This is where we have to talk about the double slit experiment.
We're going to talk about the double slit experiment in quantum physics now.
Yes.
Okay.
Now for those of you guys that want to understand this, push pause, go to YouTube, type in the double slit experiment. And then watch the little cartoon video there. That's about 5 minutes long, and it's really helpful. And there's some other ones that are longer, more helpful.
The cartoon one is really great, though. If you just want to kind of get
explains the basics. It doesn't get much into interpretation, okay? Because like anything else, what happened was there was an experiment. It showed this weird thing, and then ever since then, all of quantum physics has been built off an attempt to interpret and understand that thing. Right. And what it was basically was an experiment with. They were using particles, light, and they were shooting photons through a slit and then watching how it ended up on the back wall. Okay. Now go push pause on your podcast, go watch that, and then come back so I don't have to explain the entire experiment. All right.
Okay. We'll wait for
it. All right. You're back.
I'm going to grab something to drink. Hold on.
All right.
Okay. They're back. They've watched the double slit experiment video.
They've watched the double slit, and
welcome to the world of quantum mechanics.
And then we understand now. Now we understand that there are interpretations of the double slit experiment. One was called the Copenhagen interpretation, which also has its many interpretations of the Copenhagen interpretation. There was one known as the many worlds interpretation, which is known as multiverse theory. It gave birth to multiverse theory. But the idea was this. The question was this. It seems that my observation of matter changes matter. So it's saying that when I observe matter, it becomes particles, right? And when I'm not observing it, it becomes waves. And then we ask waves of what? Waves of infinite possibility is the best description that we can come up with. Thus the whole many worlds interpretation. So multiverse theory is based off this idea that everything is fluid, basically. And my attention is what makes it matter. That's why there are theories and some really good books and interesting. It's all theory, of course, but there's some really cool theories being put forward. The idea that consciousness creates the universe in real time. Yeah. So that each individual is creating the world of their existence, which is, of course, led to things like the law of attraction. This idea that if I think it enough, right? Because we're talking about, I give attention to a certain reality. I want to be a gajillionaire driving a Ferrari, and all my focus is on that every single day, thinking, feeling, doing the work, getting all the blockages out of me, all that kind of stuff, and then I can actually make that reality mine. Right. That's where a lot of the what's known as prosperity doctrine comes from. A lot of this idea is something they kind of godify it. It's like it has something to do with there's that kind of. But it's really
Joel Osteen kind of stuff where you're just like, if you just your thoughts are powerful. If you're super, it's funny because when you do godify it, or it's a good word, godify it, or when I guess when you commercialize the idea, it sterilizes it in a kind of a funky way. In that Joel Osteen's whole thing is about the power of thoughts and positive thinking. And but we never sit there and explicitly say that is a spiritual, that's a mystic principle is what he's talking about.
It is. It's a completely mystic principle.
Yeah. But when you do it in front of, a mega church of 40,000 people and you're doing it on TV and you have a great suit on somebody and you're saying it, it's not like it's very difficult for the practical application of that to go, how do you do that? And so I guess my question for you is, since we don't have a ton of time here, my question for you is, how do I mean, quantum mechanics is great. I'm sure there's a few guys listening that are going to go, or a few people listening that are going to go and read a bunch of books on quantum physics. And I'm sure, and I'll put in the show notes, I'll put some recommendations for some books that Seth and I recommend if you want to kind of understand some more of this stuff that are really helpful from both a sciencey standpoint, if you want to read Stephen Hawking, or if you want to get into, the Dancing Woolly Masters, the Gary Zukov stuff, or Deepak Chopra, But from this standpoint, how do I then, because all of that's great, quantum physics, great, Ant-Man, all of it. How do I get from there to actually applying something, to my own life?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the thing is, first it helps if we're starting at square one, it helps to acknowledge, conscious, subconscious, right? The idea that our whole goal is to open up to our unconscious. That consciousness is an awareness of everything that actually exists, everything as it is. When you only live in this kind of conscious world where you think your thoughts are you, then you're just kind of scrambling to survive, and you're being, again, what Carl Jung said when he said, if we don't do the work of making the unconscious conscious,
right,
the unconscious dictates your life. And then you call it fate. So you're up here going, I'm just really unlucky.
Yeah.
She left me again.
That sucks, man. It just sucks.
Yeah. It happens all the time. I'm on my third marriage. Women don't like me, I guess. And instead of going, wait a minute, why? You know what I mean? Why? That's the great thing is when you can start to recognize those patterns. But you get there all the time. It's just the way he is. That's just the way that guy is. Like he's an a-hole. He was like born an a-hole. Yeah. Okay. Sure. And we just kind of label things and say, so we can do the work of making what's unconscious conscious, right. Then we actually start to work. But again, Carl Jung said people will do the most absurd things to avoid facing that shadow. Right. And so that's why, we do, when a lot of the work that you and I are doing with people is, we could call it shadow work. We're actually kind of working into what's unconscious and what is dictating this and what is asking to be medicated and these kinds of things. And so that's really the work when we talk about consciousness. If you want to trip out on quantum physics, have a ball, but don't let your ego hijack it and turn it into an intellectual thing where it's like, if I can master quantum physics and read every book and then I can get this. Nothing replaces experience of just actually dead silence.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Well, the irony, that's the great irony of it, is like you can read it because you're curious about it and you can know it, or you could just go out and do it. And you can end up like Niels Bohr and just go, hey, we're going to stop trying to explain it. We just know that it works.
Right.
Which is, essentially that was the Copenhagen interpretation, was like, the theories work. We're never going to be able to explain it. Let's move on, and that's
right.
And that was an incredibly mystic kind of thing to do, right. So that's why there is a branch of actual physicists that are kind of doing mystic work, a
lot of them, and more, to be honest. And it's because, I think that's because at the core, everyone wants to be happy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think all quest for knowledge is to try to create joy, happiness, and peace in our lives. And so when someone keeps going and going and going, whether it's philosophy or science or religion, whatever, and you're still not happy,
right?
Then after a while, you go, what am I doing? Say Pete Rollins was like this, where he's this extremely intelligent, extremely educated philosopher. And I remember watching a talk that he gave. And it was interesting being a friend of his and having hung out with him and knowing him a bit. It was interesting to watch him get nailed down by a Q&A, but he was doing a Q&A at it was a very prestigious school. I think it was like Princeton. And he had all these philosophy students. And of course, a good philosopher has a good self-critique. That's very important. You can't be taken seriously if you can't critique your own philosophy. Right. And somebody asked him, well, what is your self-critique? And he just totally skirted the question. And the guy finally goes, hey, you didn't answer my question. What is your critique of yourself? You're saying your philosophy is you can't be happy, and that happiness is accepting that you can't be. And he's like, so what's your self-critique? And then he said, it's not working. I'm like, what's not working? He said, my philosophy, I've asked my philosophy that you can't be happy to make me happy, and it's not working.
I'm still unhappy.
And it's wonderful, that type of honesty, right? It's just wonderful. He's going, But ultimately, that's what every person wants. Every person.
Right.
So every quantum physicist on the planet, when they get home and it's 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, and they're staring at the ceiling, they just want to be happy.
And they are staring at the ceiling. They're going, oh my God.
Yeah. So
how much do we pay for that Hadron Collider? I don't know. And it's still not.
And I'm not saying that there isn't happy quantum physicists, but the thing is, it is still personal experience that drives us forward. You know, I used to hang out with Ryan Meeks. Ryan Meeks went through this really intense atheist kind of period.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, you know, after he deconstructed as a Christian, and now he's this unbelievable mystical teacher. He's fascinating, powerful, intelligent. I don't know. I could listen to him talk for hours and hours and hours. But he has this. I remember taking walks with him, and he was just like, "Yep, that's it. 5 senses. This is all we got. Nothing else." And I'm going, "Holy crap, man! This must make you miserable." No, I'm really happy. It wasn't. You know, there was anger there. There was all kinds of stuff there. Yeah. And as he's opened that up, and he's finally gone, okay, I'm going to open myself up to this bigger world. You know, open your body up to God in a sense. It'll just absolutely, you know, transform your experience of your life.
Right.
And that's all that matters, man.
No, the last thing I want to do before we go is I want to talk about humility a little bit. It's not an emotion. What is humility? It's a virtue. It's a characteristic.
I would say humility is a stance.
So a stance, and you just noted the power of Pete Rollins being able to have self-critique. What is your where in terms of your consciousness and your personal awareness, Seth Taylor's consciousness, your level of consciousness, and not from a hierarchical standpoint, but your level of consciousness. Where are you, and where do you want to go? Where do you feel like you still haven't seen it yet?
Okay, I'm going to be honest with you. I desire unity consciousness.
Okay,
like
what is it?
Buddha level, like where there's zero veil.
You want to be Neo.
Yeah. That's what I want, and I want, you know, the idea of enlightenment. You know, there's lots of debate about when did Jesus reach that kind of enlightenment, God consciousness. You know, when we talk about the cross, you know, and the idea that the cry of dereliction, my God, you know, why have you forsaken me? Like, what happened after that inside of him? What happened before that? What happened in the desert? What happened in Gethsemane? You know, these different events of this transformation of his own self. You know, the Buddha lived so much longer than Christ. You know, after his enlightenment, he was around for decades, you know, and so, you know, it's a kind of a deeper understanding. We have a deeper understanding of the nature of enlightenment from the Buddha than we do from Jesus. But I definitely desire that. When I was still in a period where my ego had a lot of attachment in me, I was very scared of the idea of enlightenment, because the ego is starting to lose its grip. It feels like death. It feels like you're losing yourself, and you're losing your identity, and you're losing your sense of yourself, right? The self, that's why the Buddha talked about the self, like, you know, this false sense that we have who we are. This is why Jesus talked about death so much. So like dying to self, taking up the cross, all that kind of idea, those teachings are about the death of the ego. And most of us have a period in our lives, and a lot of people that are trying to come through MyPilgrimage trying to find freedom are in a period where they believe their ego is them. And the loss of that is, now I've come to the point where I've lost most of it, a lot of it. But what's weird is now I'm facing, there's this whole different level where you can go, oh, there's a whole entirely different level to go into. It reminds me of so much of sports and stuff. I remember with poker, when I got pretty good at poker for a while, and I remember thinking I'm really, really good. And then I came to a point where I was teetering on this edge. You're looking over the edge going, oh, there's this, it's not hard to become a good poker player. It takes decades to become a great one. You know what I mean? Sure. And, you know, it's the same thing like most things. You know, once you think you've got something, then you start to realize how little you actually get it. And that's kind of where I'm at now, where I'm going, whoa, you know, there's a whole different level of consciousness and I want it all. I really do. I don't know why I feel that drive. I want it. And I think it's because you start to realize that the higher level of consciousness you go to, once your ego has really subsided, it's more and more and more joy. It's more and more bliss. It's more and more beauty. It's more and more transformation. It's everything. That's really what I want. So
but do you know Kung Fu?
I know Kung Fu. A part of me does. A part of me does. I believe that deep down inside.
I don't know how you can get there if you haven't learned Kung Fu. You need to load that program.
This is funny, right? Is every pop culture thing that has something about enlightenment, it has all this violence attached to it.
Yeah, well, it's
Matrix
really
the Star Wars, that kind of stuff.
But isn't that kind of why the third Matrix film kind of left everybody feeling deflated, because it dropped the dualism at the end? It was like everybody's going, wait a second, you're supposed to beat the bad guy.
Somebody has to win the war.
Somebody has to win the war. At the end, it ends in this stalemate in which they go, hey, well, yeah, this is great. Let's just do it like this. We're cool. And I remember at the time when that film came out, this is before I had my kind of awakening or whatever. I was totally disappointed. I was like, that is so unsatisfying. But now I look back and I go, oh, that's so brilliant. That's so good. Right. You know what I mean? Because we just studied, just stopped fighting. We're like, oh,
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Anyway.
Well, that's the thing, man. I stopped fighting a while ago, and my ego is a pretty well trained animal now, and it's definitely still there. And
can't get rid of it.
I have certain things in my life that are very intense catalysts for growth, and they're constantly digging me deeper and deeper and deeper. And I've come to the point where my main practice is surrender, just always surrendering to letting it just drive me deeper and deeper. That's the goal, man. Take it as far as we can go.
Well, that's good, man. I think we'll leave it at that. It was kind of a good discussion. I appreciate taking the time. So I guess the question that we lead with is, where are you at right now? Where's your consciousness at? Where is your awareness, and where isn't it? Where is the place where you're saying, I need to become more aware. I need to grow and expand in this place. Ask those questions of yourself. Bring that into your practice in prayer and meditation and even exercise. When you ask, what am I not aware of? That's what we're trying to say. Because awareness, expanded consciousness, that's the path we're on. And once it begins, it's a snowball. It continues. You really can't go back. And you don't really want to. That's where the healing, that's where all the joy, and that's where all the peace is going to come from. So, thanks for joining us this week. Next week, we're going to get into sexuality as connection. We're going to get into some kind of deep stuff. We're going to talk a lot about theology around sexuality. And we're going to talk about orientation. We're going to talk about attraction. We're going to talk about magnetism and the whole idea that what sexuality is, other than just this kind of animal act that, frankly, the porn industry kind of displays it as. It's so much more. So thanks again for listening this week. We'll talk to you next week. Aloha.